in how far tourism is related to human rights, or in how far tourism or touristic activities or the tourists or touristic businesses sometimes can violate human rights. Then we go into some examples, cases, and then I definitely would like to focus a little bit more on discussion, especially in the question, what actually you as a traveler could do to, on the one hand, avoid human rights violations, and on the other hand, if you observe something, if you see something, also how and where you could react. And then I might have some more content. We'll see how it goes on. First thing that I would ask you, as I mentioned, is actually what is your idea when it comes to tourism and human rights? So I would ask you to use your smartphone, go to, you all know after all these social interactive things in the last year, you all know Menti, I guess. Go please to menti.com and put, I need to start the research there. Now it's on. Please use the chance and put in some different ideas. What comes to your mind when it comes to tourism and human rights? And in the meanwhile, while you think a little bit, I'm going to switch from one presentation to the other one. So you should see the first results. We have one participant already asked to. Just take a minute, think about. At the moment we have answers by 3 participants. More participants. Still waiting a minute. Seems that at the moment you have very different ideas. So it seems that none of the words or the phrases was put in by more than one person at the moment. Okay. Ah, yeah. Now child labor and exploitation appears to be more important, or at least put in by several persons, or 2 persons at least. Quality, responsibility, local communities, working conditions, selling the culture, preserving the culture, privacy. So what you do is you go very much into very general sustainable tourism, responsible tourism issues. Third thing is what we have to see always is not everything that's not fair or not sustainable or not responsible is automatically also violating human rights. That's sometimes a pity, but it is as it is. What I see here is that, I mean, several of you mentioned things around labor issues, child labor, working conditions. Some of you already mentioned some solutions like code of conduct. You mentioned different target groups, so people having rights that could be violated, like also locals, employees. Okay, I'm going back to to install something additionally, which I'm not going to do. Okay, here we're back. Thank you for this first impression. So I now I know a little bit what you think about, and I would ask you, if you see that picture here, I mean, what comes to your mind here? Is this a violation of human rights? How is the situation set? What could be the background here? Do you have any comments on that?
Sorry, Christian,
Yep.
we just see the slides very tiny, so maybe you can do it like sharing that we see the whole slide.
That's funny. It's fully I'm in full presenter mode, and it takes the full picture screen here.
Okay, because we see just like all slides.
We see it with the notes section.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay,
maybe you can Christian, vielleicht auf duplizieren. Ja, genau, so ist besser.
I didn't do anything, by the way. Now I stopped. I'll try to do it again. This is one of the reasons why I like and usually work with Zoom and not so much with WebEx. Is it better now?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so again, you see one picture here. It's a picture in Africa, Maasai. What do you see here? What could be the challenge? What's the problem? What's the setting of the picture? Do you see anything that it's kind of disturbing your feeling?
The locals are sitting on the floor and the tourist is sitting on the chair.
Okay, so that's already kind of, well, not on the same eye level.
Yeah.
Meeting, yeah.
Yeah, right.
What do you think? What's the background? What happened before this picture was taken, or before the lady is going to take some pictures? Have you ever been in a similar situation?
So maybe it's questionable if the people do that really from their own will, or if they are in some way forced to do that, be it economically or other reasons.
Maybe also whether these people who are being photographed, if they are aware what this means, being on a picture, and if it goes online with the privacy.
I mean, according to the European data protection guidelines, the lady would need to have a written and signed agreement of the local people that she's going to use the picture whatever for, be it her website, be it her whatever. Well, like I use pictures now, yeah. Do you think they speak the same language? Do you think she asked before? Most probably not. I mean, this picture looks like a setting that is, you see also some other tourists in the background, an arranged meeting with local people arranged by the tour operators. And he might have said that there are tourists coming and please behave nicely to them, whatever they do, kind of. And the result is then that she's taking pictures, most probably without asking. I have a second situation, a different one. Do you see any difference in this situation here?
A difference that I see is that people who are being filmed don't show their whole face, so they're somehow covered more. But
yeah, but that's simply part of the local traditional clothes. By the way, he's not filming. That's a Hasselblad, a very expensive camera, a very professional one. He's also taking pictures.
So might be it gives a bit the impression that he would show the picture to the respective person and ask for permission if he could use it or not, maybe.
I mean, the difference is, and the point is really that it's difficult to judge if you just see this picture not knowing the background. I mean, on the one hand, the distance is even closer. So it seems that he's intruding the privacy even more than the lady. I mean, he's coming with the camera very close to the face. I mean, I wouldn't be very comfortable in this situation on the side of the locals. But what you don't know and you can't know by just seeing the picture is they're on a tour together for 10 days altogether. It was the 5th day. And they were always very interested in his camera. And actually, this is a small situation where he explains how the camera works. And yes, he's taken pictures of the guides, but they agreed on that before. And in 10 seconds, he will turn around the camera and pass it to the guides, and they are then taking pictures of him. And also from the composition of the picture itself, I mean, it's a communication at the same eye level. And in the other picture, as you said, she's sitting and it's a little bit top down. So what you have here is a kind of indication that it is a violation of one of the human rights, which is the right of privacy. But it's more likely that it really happens in the first picture, not so much in the second picture. This is one part of what we learn here is it's very difficult really to see and to understand situations if you don't have the full picture, in which situations human rights are really violated by whom and what the story is. But let me give you some of the examples for human rights violations. I mean, several of you mentioned working conditions. And yes, working conditions is one of the issues where the rights of people in the tourism industry, employed or informally employed, are rather often violated. And it's a wide range of different violations. I don't know if, how many of you already worked in the industry, maybe as an intern in a hotel or in a cafeteria, in a restaurant. Actually, if you have no written working contract, this is already a violation of your human rights in this respect. I mean, this is, of course, a very minor violation compared to the violations here in that picture. I mean, it's a picture from the Himalayan area. The guides there are often paid with very small amount, and the amount of fee they receive is very often directly related to the weights they carry. So the result is that they're carrying up to 100, 120 kilograms and still receive very low wages, resulting in the fact that they cannot afford proper equipment. So they have very often no proper mountain boots. You see that some of them walking in thin sandals, or even the first one is even walking barefoot. Or they have to sleep outside of the lodges in 5,000, 6,000 meters altitude in rather thin tents and having very poor sleeping bags because they cannot afford them and the tour operators are not caring about those things. This was part of an international NGO campaign, tourism concern, and one of the results is that there is a code of conduct now in the region of the Himalayan area that deals with that issue, and nearly all the local tour operators agreed in better working conditions. So, but again, what you see is human rights, and especially in the terms of working conditions, covering a wide field of different violations, and often they are not formulated in a very clear wording. Human rights in respect to working conditions talk mainly about now I'm missing one word, sorry for that. I'll come back to that later. And it's the International Labour Organization who deals with this respective part of human rights with the working conditions, and they're responsible for formulating the different rights. And the wording I was looking for is decent work. So the formulation is that there is a right for decent work, but decent is not a very clear formulation. It always is related to the circumstances, also to the national situations. So, for example, the human rights and working conditions do not define any clear financial regulation. They don't say what's the basic income. They're just talking about an income that's in relation to the overall conditions in the country. One example for human rights violations in tourism. Another example is this, and here the violators are not so much, it's also the tourism industry, because it's also tour operators organizing those trips, but the direct violators are the tourists. And this is a heavy violation of the right of privacy. And the situation here is that it's mainly northwestern part of Thailand, and you have 3-4 villages that are where mainly the Kayan live, and biggest proportion of this tribe, mountain tribe, is coming as a refugee from Myanmar, from Burma, and they have a very strange status in Thailand, which is already a violation. They have no official status as asylum seekers, so they have no permit to work, but they're kind of accepted to live there. And one of the traditions is that only the women, not the men, wear those breast coils, and every half year they receive another one, and this makes the necks a little bit longer, which is culture, which is also a violation, a traditional cultural violation of the human rights, because they cannot remove the coils anymore, because the head would not have the neck would not have the strength to hold the head then. So if they would remove the coils, well, the head will fall. But what happens is that tourist buses come, and all the tourists getting off the bus and going into the houses, taking pictures of the ladies and of the girls. In that moment, all the men hide somewhere because they're not interesting for the tourists, because they don't wear anything special. There is a whole set of different human rights violations in this whole situation, but mainly focusing on the right of privacy violated by the tourists. Similar violations you could also see in the Alpine areas. It's not only that we talk about only developing countries. I mean, we have situations in the Alps, very picturesque old villages, where the tourists also directly enter the houses and taking pictures of the locals, of the house, of the interior, of everything, without asking, because not using the same language like the tourists, like the locals. Last situation and last case I'd like to mention, also coming on in the world cloud, child labor and also sexual exploitation of children. And this is, of course, a very severe violation of human rights. We know from different sources that, especially in the informal sector in tourism, we have a huge amount of children working. I mean, we have one figure from the UNESCO saying that 10 to 15% of all employees, and employees also informal employee in tourism, are younger than 18. And this already creates the difficult statistics here. The UN system only knows children and adults. And the limit for being a child is 18. According to the Swiss regulation, to most of our countries, you're allowed to work already with 15, 16, with some specific regulations, even sometimes with 14. So you perfectly fit to our legal requirements, but according to the UN system, this would be child labor. But if you reduce it, at the end, it's maybe 8% of all employees that are younger than 15. This is really child labor. And especially when it comes to sexual exploitation of children, and here UNESCO is talking about, well, different statistics. Some say 3 million, some others say 5 to 6 million children that are regularly sexually exploited in tourism worldwide. I have another example. It was not the last one, sorry. And here you see that sometimes human rights violations could be marketed in a way that they sound really nice. We're going to Tanzania, and the Tanzanian government came up with a plan to connect two of the large wildlife sanctuaries, the Masai Mara National Park and the Serengeti National Park. And the connection should enable the wild animals to have a genetic exchange. That's very important. That sounds like a very important environmental project. But of course, in the marketing, what they did not say is that 40,000 Maasai are living in that area. and that for this wildlife corridor, they would just grab the land of roughly 1,500 square kilometers and need to displace those 40,000 Maasai. That's not the end of the story. The end of the story that in reality, the idea of the government was not only this wildlife corridor, but leasing a part of the land to an international tour operator that would start with hunting tourism there, that especially then for the royal families from the Emirates would provide very special, very good hunting possibilities. So actually the idea was to remove 40,000 Maasai from the land, that some of the royal could shoot animals. So we have a different variety of human rights that could be violated in tourism. Talking about the decent working conditions, we're talking about the right for privacy, land rights, child labor, sexual abuse of children, different activities in tourism that are really in contradiction to any health protection. So you see, human rights are covering a wide area. And 2 more slides, then I stop with theory. Looking to the human rights, what's important to know is maybe the origin of the human rights. And that it is not one single document that covers everything here. We have 2 parts. We have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is originating from the end of the Second World War. So 1948, after Second World War, under the UN, the important countries sitting together and trying to define what they call our inherent rights that are really part of our nature, of the human nature, and without we cannot live as human beings. But at the end, this was just a base for everything that was developed then later on. And we have a different set and a set of different treaties dealing with different parts of the human rights. And the whole set is then called together the International Bill of Human Rights. And it took till the 70s that it was complete, and it's still under negotiation. And different UN bodies are responsible for different parts. Like, as I mentioned before, the International Labour Organization is dealing with the working conditions. But the more important question is, and this is now my question to you, who can do what according to, or to enable the human rights to be the real situation for people, and or who can support those that deal with human rights, who can react, whose task is it, whose responsibility is it to care about the human rights? What do you think here?
Maybe the
Any
one
idea?
of the government, that the government has to ensure that human rights are ensured in the tourism places. But I think it's also like we as a tourist have to inform ourselves maybe better before we go somewhere and do some activities.
Okay, so you mentioned governments, you mentioned tourists. Who else?
I think basically it's important for everyone involved, and there should also be the possibility for, let's say, for local communities that are involved to be educated about their rights and what rights they have, what possibilities they have.
Okay, is it education, or who is responsible for giving this information to local people, for example?
Spontaneously, I would say the tourism organizations that operate with them.
Okay, so you think if I'm a tour operator and my destination is, let's say, Thailand, my duty is to inform the Thai people about their human rights that might be violated because of my tourists going to Thailand?
No, because you don't, as a tour operator, you don't operate directly with these people. So maybe when you work with local companies together, you have to make sure that they they operate in a way that don't violate the human rights. But this is also
Okay.
difficult, I think, because you're so far away. How can you really ensure that they are not violating? I think you can do monitoring and stuff like that, but it seems very difficult.
Maybe we also have to divide into like legal and ethical points of view. So on the legal side, probably yes, the laws are made in the countries where it happens, but on an ethical side, exactly, tour operators should or have maybe a lot of power in doing so, in choosing the right local companies, or
Okay, in choosing the right companies and putting things into the contracts that you have with those companies. Okay, this would be one point. But at the moment, we have the tourists, we have the tourism industry, we have governments. Any other stakeholder that is responsible for implementing or you taking care about the human rights?
Maybe NGOs
Okay.
could maybe serve as a support for the different enterprises involved, for the local enterprises, maybe to help them accomplish the standard that is needed.
Actually, I'm blaming myself now, but I forgot the NGOs here. So the whole civil society, and that's very important, of course. Yeah. I mean, additionally, I would see some tasks also for the people being employed in tourism, especially when it comes to tour guides, because they have the direct contact also with the locals. And of course, it's a part of education, what we do here now. And it should be also part of the media. But legally, do you think that the tourism industry is obliged to take care about the human rights?
Normally, that should be a very clear task, let's say, also to be very conservative by the police, or I mean, if there's like rights or like the government, the police, if you just look at it from a legal point of view, or like inspections from government agencies or stuff like that, like it would be normal around the world. Or
the point is, the human rights are written as an international treaty. Not all the different parts of the human rights are also signed and ratified by all countries. So actually, we need always to have a look which countries signed, for example, the labor rights developed by the International Labour Organization. And they're not written for the industry. So those countries that signed and ratified in their national governments the different parts of the different treaties that are part of the human rights, for the International Bill of Human Rights, they need to transform these international treaties into national laws and legal requirements. And then, of course, the industry and the police has to follow the implementation of those legal requirements. But first, it's up to the governments to act. This was a very long discussion point. Now the UN found also some systems on how the industry could really take human rights more into account, but it's still on a volunteer base, so there is no direct obligation for the industry to do that. But for our discussion now, I mean, you're tourists, you're traveling. What can you do? I mean, who of you ever came into a situation when now reflecting human rights where you think then or now this was a violation of human rights? Anyone has any experience in that?
I visited Myanmar last year.
Okay.
And we made a boat trip on the inner lake. And on the inner lake, it's also very popular to see these women. You showed on the slides before, like the women with these rings around the head. And we could choose, because we had a private boat, we could choose which places we wanted to visit. And then our boat driver asked us if we want to visit this place, and then we said no, because we don't want to be there and like make pictures, because there are a lot of tourists visiting this place, and then he just accept our decision, and then we didn't went there.
Good point. Was he surprised?
Actually, no, because we said from the beginning that we wanted to say which places we wanted to visit, because we only had like 1 day on the inner lake, and the inner lake is huge and there's a lot to see. And we are like more interested in landscape and visit temples instead of, tourist attractions like this.
How did you know before about this situation? I mean, what was really the base for your choice, for your wise and good choice not to visit this?
When I travel, I always do a lot of research. So I read a lot of blogs before, like in advance, before I visit the place. And then I just read a lot of recommendations, which place to visit and which maybe you don't want to visit because of those reasons. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I think this is always the first point, really. This is something every tourist can and should do. Inform yourself before you travel and try to avoid situations where you might be part of violations of human rights, like this would be. Okay. What else could you do as a tourist? I mean, did you, in this specific situation, did you tell the boat guide just, we don't want to go there? Or did you explain why you didn't want that?
So actually his English was quite bad. I explained it, but I don't
Okay.
know if he understood me or not. So
Yeah, okay. But at least you tried. Okay.
yeah.
I mean, this is another thing tourists can do. I mean, trying to explain about human rights or your choice in this respect, and trying to educate or contribute a little bit to the information to the locals that they have rights.
The problem there is that the boat drivers get the commission if it brings us to this place, and then we buy stuff there. That's why the boat drivers always want us to go to these places, because that's the only way he made commission, or like have a little bit more money than his original salary. But I just said in the end, thank you for not bringing us there, and then we gave him a good tip, and he was really happy in the end.
Well done. Okay. What else could you do as a tourist? Any other ideas or any other situation that you already experienced?
Well, this is Sibyl. I also work for a tour operator, so actually, I've got like two hearts in within me. But I saw that when I visited Sri Lanka some years ago, where there's still like a huge backlog because of the civil war, and there's still like loads of human rights violated on a daily basis. You can try to address it to your tour guide, but the point is actually it's a little bit the same, like these women who are selling stuff or getting photographed, etc. They are making a living out of that. So I think that's always like this, let's call it conflict or inner conflict I do have in such situations, because yes, you can talk with them, but obviously they also have a past, and they grew up with it. I remember another discussion I had in South Africa with a white female, discussing apartheid, just as an example, where I saw that obviously we have a completely different point of view because we were not involved and our families were not involved. And so actually for me it's kind of rather difficult to just like point it or draw it black and white, because yes, there are violations, or there were violations, and obviously education is probably the best way to deal with it. But me, in the situation as a tourist and also in the situation as a tour operator, which at the end of the day is responsible that we have jobs here in Switzerland. I can only go so far because otherwise I wouldn't be like, yeah, I couldn't do my job actually. So I'm kind of, there is like loads of gray area. Unfortunately, I'd wish it were different, but yeah.
Is your tour operator sending guides with the groups? Are you selling
No,
packages with guides? No, okay.
We do work with local. I'm working for Travel House Hotel Plan here in Switzerland.
Ah, okay. But then you work with local guides?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have training programs for the local guides?
No, we don't have, because we do that through our DMCs on spot.
Okay.
And so obviously, yeah, we can ask whether or not they have training programs. But unfortunately, we are like way too small on a global scale to actually kind of like making really sure that they are upholding some kind of standards. So there is like this situation that obviously we're not a German tour operator, which brings like 10 times of clients than we do, for instance, or other ones. So I think that's still an industry issue, which is quite big.
Fully agree. And I come back to the question what guides and what also tour operators in the industry actually already doing or could do. Being a tourist, I would expect that if I see something, I could go to my guide, either a guide that's coming with me from my country, and if I'm a package tourist, or if I have any local contact person and report something, and that then I know that something happens with this information. Coming back to the question of information before, I mean, I think it's also a task for the tourists if they book packages in a travel agency or with a tour operator to ask about, because this also raises awareness. I mean, usually if you ask, for example, about working conditions in the hotels that are included in the package, usually the person at the tour operators would not know in detail. But simply with the question, you raise awareness for the issue. And this means then at the end that the agent is asking for that, or that at the end, maybe the tour operator really includes some clause in the contracts with the hotels there. And this asking on the spot is something that's very important. What we realized, we did some projects on sexual exploitation of children. And of course, it's always a difference if you talk about something that is not only a violation of human rights, but also a severe violation of the legal situation, like exploitation of children, or if we talk about a rather minor violation of human rights that could also happen. But in this respect, the local industries, both the local agencies, but also local hotels, they needed always the backup that those issues are something the European tourists and the European tour operators are really concerned of. And only when they know that if they report something to the European tour operator back, that it's not, that the reaction would not be, well, you're complaining about our guests and this is now we choose another hotel. So if there is really the feeling of the local industry that this is an important issue also for the majority of the guests and for the business partners, then they also act accordingly, and then they start to think about measures and possibilities to implement human rights in the full respect. We just have 15 minutes left, and I need to jump a little bit in my slides. Let me see what I do. And yeah, one point more about what tour guides could do. I see with proper training of tour guides, with also the feeling that they are responsible for the implementation, they could do a lot. For example, let's take this first example of taking pictures. I mean, many of the tourists are simply not aware of the fact that well, taking pictures is something that has to do something with the privacy, with intruding the privacy, ignoring it. And I know many tourists that simply did not think about asking local person or any person if taking a picture. And here the tour guide has a very important role in explaining the issue, not taking picture him or herself, being a good role model, and especially but explaining why. So this is one of the important issues for the tour operators in this cultural interpretation between the local culture and the culture of the guests. The tourism industry is one of the first industries, aside the textile industries, where on the international level, these human rights issues really started to be an issue. And Switzerland, especially Kony, was really one of the first ones. And this shows us it's very much related to single persons. It was simply the person being responsible for sustainable development at Kony. By the way, he's teaching this semester in the major in our university. And he managed that Kony was thinking about the mission statement and about a mission statement that included human rights issues. And at the end, after long discussion, and nearly everyone in Kony was really involved, they came up with this mission statement saying that they respect and trying to proactively foster the human rights. Of course, within the sphere of influence, the tour operator is never responsible for everything that happens in the destination, but wherever in the whole service chain he can influence, he should influence, especially the rights of the most vulnerable of our society. And what was also important is that they thought about appropriate response mechanisms. So in the point when something happens, when any of the guests reported something that he or she realized that the tour operator is reacting to that. And this mission statement was the starting point for a try to fully understand the impacts the operations of Kony had on human rights aspects. And they implemented two analyses, one in India, one in India and the other one in Kenya. And they hired local consultancies, they worked together with NGOs, and they were completely transparent in whatever the result was. And from that method to analyze the human rights impact, they developed a matrix of different areas of where they could be active. They very clearly argued they could not do everything at the same time, so they need to have a step-by-step approach. And they thought about issues that are highly relevant, like children's rights. And on the other hand, in the matrix, they looked at issues where they could easily act, like labor rights, labor issues directly in their own company. And so they developed a set of measures how to increase the avoidance of human rights, of negative human rights aspects. And Kony was then one of the starting actors in something. This is what's really a role model. The German-speaking tourism industry developed this roundtable, Human Rights in Tourism, which is a multi-stakeholder roundtable where you have the industry, a lot of different tour operators, where you have the civil society, a little bit academia. We are a member of the Human Right Roundtable, and you have also governments in there. And this roundtable is very active in the question: how could this issue of human rights really be implemented in the business, in the everyday business life of tour operators, travel agencies, etc. So, for example, they developed guidelines for the implementation of human rights in tour operators. They dealt with working conditions of bus drivers. They developed a set of online courses for agents in travel agencies, etc. So this is what I at the moment see really very positive role model. So for me, the tourism industry really took the responsibility to act in that field of human rights issues And it started as a German-speaking roundtable. It's now institutionalized as an association, and they're also doing steps towards an internationalization by using also English, by having also nowadays some new members in the UK, having good contacts with UNWTO. So it's really widening also the scope of the membership. So at the end, human rights issues are something that is relevant in the tourism industry. On the other hand, I see also that the tourism industry is already reacting. But at the end, for a full implementation of human rights issues, it really needs all different stakeholders. It needs the governments, it needs the tourism industry, but it needs also every single tourist. So it's really also a task for us, if we travel, to keep our eyes open and to think already before how we can inform ourselves, and to think of, if we see something, how we could react, and then in the case we see something, we do react. I tried to shorten that a little bit. We'll have some minutes for discussions or questions and answers, or if you have any comment or any question, I'd be happy to answer. Or again, the question to you, if you already have some personal experiences with any situations where you think that, well, this was a violation of human rights, I maybe could have acted in a different way if I knew before.
Yeah, Christian, thank you very much. First of all, I think like there's very clear, as you said, human rights violations like child abuse and all that. I mean, that's very clear. And then we are like on the other side where like we have our, let's say also, we know about the human rights, but sometimes you're in countries or where these situations are seen a bit differently, like you're with the pics or with the pictures or the rights of privacy and all that. It's clear it's a human right, but then it's just handled different there. And that, I think that's especially the situation which are then difficult for us as tourists also. Or I just also can personally say, like from an experience in Namibia, where exactly with all like these difficult situations between like the white people there and then the San people there, so the nomads, and also the black people there who live not in a nomadic way. And there are so many tensions or difficulties between them. And if you walk around there with our like human rights framework in mind, then you just come to problems there. I have sometimes the feeling you cannot evade them. That's a bit like the difficult point.
I mean, we cannot have the challenge that tourism is saving the world, or also the tourists cannot really save the world. But the question is always, what can we avoid? So what kind of behavior do we have as a tourist to avoid additional, in this case, human rights violations or unfair situations? And in case if we see something, if we can experience something, what can we do to improve the situation, or can we do something? So it's, as you said, it's always keep the eyes open, be reflective, and try to be proactive if possible, but don't have the demand to you, or the challenge for yourself really to save the world. That's not possible.
Thank you.
Any other comment or question? No? Okay. In this case, I hand it back to Sibylle. I don't know if there are some closing words, or if I should close the event.
I will. Yeah, thank you. I will close the event. I will just share my screen again. I hope you can see it. Yeah, first of all, thank you very much.
You wanted to do a picture, no?
Yeah, I will do it afterwards. Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you, Christian, for this really interesting presentation. For me, I could really learn some things in future. I will inform myself better before I travel somewhere. And yeah, for the other, thanks for participation. And this event is organized by Student Hub Chur, and we are looking for members. So if you are interested in working with us together, you can just contact us at, like, we are on Facebook, you find us on Instagram, or just write an email. And there will also be other events this week. For example, tonight we have at 5 p.m. also with Christian, and we will discuss about fly or no fly. So if you are interested in that, you can just join. And yeah, exactly, Christian already said something. I wanted to ask if it's okay if we take a picture together so that we have just something or we maybe can use for Instagram. Like, it's not sure yet, but everyone who is okay with that, I kindly ask to put on your cameras. Okay, so I will take the picture in 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you very much. I wish you all a nice afternoon and maybe see you at another event. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Ciao.
Bye.
Just stay online for a second, Sibylle, and ich bin am Anfang beim Bildschirmteilen draufgekommen, dass WebEx mich mein Video nicht teilt, also das Audio eines Videos nicht teilen lässt und mich gefragt hat, dass ich da parallel noch etwas installieren sollte. Und ich habe mir gedacht, wenn ich das installiere, haut es mich aus dem WebEx raus.